And welcome everybody to the PCS Like a Pro show. I am your host, Megan Harless, as always, and I'm excited for y'all to join us today because we have a very important show for you. We're going to be talking about a very important topic that if you're PCSing right now, something you should be thinking about, should be actively doing, preparing for, to make sure you're set up for what's happening later this year. But before we get into all of that, a couple things I just want to remind some folks on is that we're hearing a lot of questions about inconvenience claims in the groups. You are eligible for an inconvenience claim if you are in possession of your home or have access to your home and the moving company misses your RDD, your required delivery date. So there's some more information that goes into there about inconvenience claims, but we're dropping the link into the comments so you guys can go and take a look at the inconvenience claim fact sheet to take a look at that, view that, see about your eligibility, see what's covered, and hopefully answer some of your questions on that. Additionally, we're going to drop the link to all of the PCS moving related frequently asked questions on Military OneSource. There's a lot of information there. A lot of questions we hear in the group are all posted there as well. So we're going to drop those links into the comments so you can go back, you can take a look and see if, a question or issue that you have is listed there to find out what it is that you need to know. So again, we're going to jump into today because I'm really excited. We have Sarah with us from Secured Family Initiatives. First, we're going to say congratulations to Sarah because number one, she is our Armed Forces Insurance 2022 Military Spouse of the Year for the Space Force and overall. So we're really proud of Sarah and the work that she's doing. So congratulations on that. And then Sarah is going to be having a military child coming very soon. And so congratulations on that because we love all things kids and babies here at our house.
Thanks, Megan.
So we're excited for you there. So welcome to the show, Sarah. And could you just take a moment and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, you've done a great summary so far, but I am a Space Force spouse and I'm the Executive Director of Secure Families Initiative. We're most often known for our voting and civic engagement education materials, but we also advocate on foreign policy and national security issues. So I think it's important that our voices be included in any and all decisions that impact our families.
No, absolutely. And we have as many folks know, coming this year, we have midterm elections happening. And so today we're going to be talking about all the things that you really need to know in regards to voting, registering, and all those details that sometimes we don't think about until it's like, a couple weeks before. And we're just like, oh, shucks, like I should do something here. So right now we've got thousands of spouses and their families, their service members as well, are PCSing. And it's most likely, again, been a few years since they've had to figure out about the voting, the registration, and all of that. And as we mentioned, we've got the midterm election fast approaching. So as a military spouse, where can we vote at? Like, do we just get to pick a random state? Does it have to be at our last state, our new state, our home of right? Like, how do we figure out just the where piece of it?
Megan, this is the $1 million question. So if you have been thinking about this, you are far from alone. This is the number one thing that trips up military spouses and family members. So the quick answer is it kind of depends. The most important term you should think about when you think about where you're supposed to be voting is the term residency. What do we mean by residency? So there's the place you currently live, there's the place you've lived before, there's the place you lived originally when the military picked you up and swept you off your feet. All of those different addresses, if you're an active duty family who moves and has multiple addresses, at some point you would have had to establish an official residency. This is kind of for service members, it's what's on their LES for state tax purposes. So if you're a civilian military spouse and you're formally employed, it's probably the address that's going to be on your W-2 forms, that kind of thing. If you don't have formal employment, you don't have that easy shortcut, but that means that you get to pick where you want, which of the various addresses you want to be your residency. But the important thing is that it's that residency is where you call home, no matter where the military sends you elsewhere. And it's going to be the place you're going to vote, and it's the place where you pay state taxes. You usually want those two addresses to be the same thing. So everyone makes a different choice about where they want their residency to be. Some people keep the same residency the same, and then even if they move around, it's still the same residency and they just get their ballot mailed to them at different locations where they live. But some people like to change their residency every time they PCS. So that's why it's not like a really easy answer as to whether it's your current location or past location, because you have a choice. And I think that's pretty empowering. Now, real quick, Megan, if I can just clarify, we use the term home of record sometimes in a way that can be misleading. So home of record is that original address that you had when the military swept you off your feet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your home of record usually never changes. That is permanent. Your state of residency, though, may change. So these are technically two different terms, and I just want to make sure that people aren't getting tripped up and thinking that they're identical. Sometimes they happen to be the same, but usually not. Similarly, you might think, oh, I have to vote wherever I have a driver's license. It may be the case that your residency and your driver's license are the same, but that's not necessarily true. Like, I have a driver's license here in Virginia where I currently live because it was more convenient to get a local ID, but I'm actually a Washington state voter. So that's just a quick clarification for folks.
Yeah, no, absolutely some good information there. Because we definitely, figuring out the where, I think, is one of the hardest pieces to it. And I'm all team, let's keep things simple. So like our home of record, our residency, our taxes, all of that stuff is the same place. Because as I was telling Sarah before all of this, like I hate having to update things and change things when we move so often. Like I want what she called the moving concierge service. I want somebody to like set up my electric account, update my absentee ballot voting and all of that stuff. So the more that we can keep things simple, the best it is, at least in my opinion. And we got Marla here joining us in the comments saying hi. Marla, she's one of our friends. We love her. We've had her on a previous episode talking about her as well and her organization and what she does. So now that we know the where piece of where we're going to be voting at, how do we figure out like getting registered to vote? Like, what is that process like? Because I feel like anytime it deals with something government related, like even getting our driver's license, like it feels very intimidating and daunting, and just like it's a scary office and people are going to yell at me. So what is that registration process like, and how do we navigate that piece?
Oh man, if there's one takeaway today, it should be that registering to vote should not be scary and no one's going to yell at you. I pinky promise. So there are basically two forms that you have to use. So if you are voting in the place where you are currently located, the place where you're living, that's your residency, that's where you're voting. Guess what? You get to use the normal civilian voter registration form for that locality, that state. There's nothing special or bonus because you're military, you are a local voter, easy. Now, if you're voting somewhere else that's far away, because let's say your residency is back home, but you're temporarily living somewhere else because the military PCS'd you there, you're what's considered an absentee voter. That means you're away from your voting address. And as a military voter, you get to use a special one-stop shop kind of form called the Federal Postcard Application, or the FPCA. Da, da, da. It's a very wonderful, awesome, we love this form because it lets you do so many different things. So the FPCA is a form that you can use to register for the very first time, to update a registration that already exists, and to update, even if you're not updating your registration, but you're simply updating your mailing address where you want your absentee ballot to be sent. You can do all of those things with the same form, and you can't fill it out too many times. So you can fill it out as many times as it takes to make sure that the most up-to-date information about you is in the files with your election official. So again, if you're a military voter and if you're voting absentee this fall because you're not living in the same place where your voting residency is, use the Federal Postcard Application. It quickly identifies you as a military voter, and it gives you all the rights and privileges that comes along with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just a reminder, if you're like my family that PCS this summer, to make sure you update your address. I've got, right before we moved, we got from our county registration office the little, like, is this address accurate and correct for when we send your ballot and everything. And I have it tucked into my PCS binder as a reminder of like, now we're in our new house because we PCS'd a couple weeks ago, and I need to get that out, and I need to send it back or give them a call and say, hey, our address has changed. So make sure you get that filled out, sent back. And as Sarah said, you can't do it too many times. I think the first year, one of the first couple of years, I think I filled it out like 5 times because I wasn't sure what I was doing. But I'm just like, we should be good. I think we're good. And thankfully, like it all worked out. We got our ballots, but definitely do that. So one of the things with our community is that we are a very nomadic community. We PCS, we move often. And sometimes it feels like, because we're at a place for just a short period of time, anywhere from 12 months, maybe 3 years. Sometimes if we're lucky, we get a little longer, but sometimes it just feels like we don't really make a difference. And that sometimes our vote, because we're only there for a short period of time, may not, really make a difference in things. So why is it important for our military community to really get out there, get involved, and to vote during election time?
So first of all, I want to point to 2 situations in which we know that military ballots did literally make a difference. So in the presidential elections in 2000 and in 2020, in Florida and in Georgia, each respectively, the margin of difference of victory for the presidential candidate came down to absentee military ballots. So I think it's really important for us to know our ballots totally count and they totally make a difference. Now, you may be telling yourself, yeah, but I'm not a Florida or Georgia voter, which I'm neither, so I feel you. But here's the thing. Even if you don't make a numeric difference in the presidential election, let's say, you can still definitely make a numeric difference in a lot of local and state elections. And you might be thinking, yeah, but maybe I'm voting somewhere where I'm not living for a long time, or maybe I'm voting back home, but I don't feel like I have as much of a connection back there because I haven't lived there in a few years. Either way, I would love for us to really embrace the kind of unique asset that a military family brings to the ballot box. And that is the fact that you've lived all over the world. You have seen government in different formats, whether it's international or even just across state boundaries, right? You've gotten to experience different ways of life. And I think that is tremendous. That brings tremendous insights to how you process policy and candidates and voting. And so instead of seeing our nomadic culture as a liability or a downside, I'd love for us to really see it as an asset and a unique superpower that I think makes us really cool voters, personally.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know it always comes around when it's all those election times of all the local and state things, and we haven't lived there in a while, and we may not be in the know of what's going on. And there's a new person on the ballot we haven't heard about before, and suddenly you're starting to research and try to figure out, where do they stand on things? And, do you like them? Do you want them to be in charge of whatever it is they're running for? That's where having family and friends maybe back home that are involved in things where you can be able to ask them, has this person done, good things, or are they just, trying to have the spotlight? And
totally. And there are lots of great nonpartisan online tools too that help walk you through your ballot. And we link to 2 really good reputable ones on our SFI website. So yeah, there's plenty of resources out there. Do not be intimidated. You got this.
Yes, no, absolutely. So one of the things that, when it comes to figuring out about where to vote and all of that, is figuring out, when we have issues, and we always told, well, contact your elected officials, your elected representatives. Again, what state representatives do we call? Do we call, where we vote at? Do we call where we live at? Do we call everywhere that we've lived at? Because, it's maybe impacted life everywhere, and we want to make sure everybody knows. Do we just go down the list of all, 435 House representatives and hope somebody picks up? Like, how do we figure out who we're calling when people say, oh, just call your elected official?
I'm going to pick C, option 3. No, seriously. When you're a military spouse, you might think, oh, I'm not a constituent anywhere. But I actually like to say that you're like double or triple the constituent everywhere, because you do have multiple claims to constituency based on all the places you've lived. So truly, feel free to lean into any zip code that you have gotten mail at any point in your life. Use that zip code and contact that representative, seriously. Now, to your point, Megan, it's easy to feel like, well, do I have to contact all 535 members of Congress? No, there are ways to be strategic. So the way that we think about it in our advocacy world is it really depends on the issue that you're focused on. So If the issue that you need to raise is individual casework, so it's something that really just impacts you, your family, you want to focus on the elected representatives of wherever the jurisdiction is where that happened. So if it's a housing issue, for example, on a base that you're currently living, even if you're not a voter there, that's okay. You're living there. That's where the issue is impacted. You're probably going to want to contact the representative and senators for that base. Similarly, if you're talking about something that happened at your last base, but you just PCS, you're probably going to want to focus on those electives, not your current ones. Again, that's for individual casework. Now, if we're talking about policy, trying to pass legislation that makes a broader impact on everyone in a similar situation, that sort of thing, there are ways to kind of think strategically, like, okay, which committees in Congress focus on this issue, right? Maybe it's an Armed Services Committee. Maybe it's a Foreign Affairs Committee. Maybe it's the Department of Transportation, the committee that oversees them. You never know. Check out the committees that focus on those issues, and then try to focus on members of those committees, because they're going to be the ones that have the most leeway to become leaders on that issue. So that's kind of my 2 cents. But really, you can't, it's kind of like Times filling out the FPCA. You can't over contact members of Congress. It's always best to send more messages than you technically need and cast a wide net, because frankly, you never know who's going to actually decide to respond. But that's a way of at least prioritizing your time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I want to throw a curveball question at you that I was just thinking of as you were talking us through that process. Is that sometimes when we contact our representatives, if we're not a constituent, we're not voting for them, we're not voting in their area because we're absentee balloting from somewhere else, and we contact them and, they want to know like our address, they want to make sure you're a registered voter. And sometimes if you don't have an address in that location or you're not a registered voter in that area, they'll say, or whoever answers the phone will say, we can't talk to you, or you can't fill out their form on their website because they'll say you're not registered here. Is there a workaround to that of how to actually get a hold of somebody to at least hear our concern or to talk to somebody there?
So I've actually never heard of a situation where if you live in an address and you fill out your name and you use that address to get through their little form on their website, I've never heard of a situation where a congressional office has said, well, you're not on the voter rolls, therefore we don't care about your problem. Because they recognize that they obviously have residents they're responsible for, whether those residents decide to vote or not. So I would, I think, push back on that characterization. I mean, if you've heard of a situation in which that's happening, let me know ASAP, because that's really problematic. But point being to, I think, leaning into like, hey, I might be a temporary resident of this place, which may mean that I'm not on the voter roll. But guess what? If this is affecting me, it's going to affect the next family that gets PCS'd here and the next family. And you can even do a quick Google search. How many military families are stationed at this installation, or how many veterans are in this county? That data is all easily available online. You can quickly extrapolate your individual situation to make it have an impact on a broader swath of residents within that jurisdiction.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we talked a lot about, voting, registering, figuring out all those pieces to it. What else do we need to know about this, about getting active in our community that we have not already discussed?
Yeah. So one little tip I will just say, even if you're not a locally registered voter, that does not mean you can't still get involved in elections local to where you are. So when I lived in Nebraska for a PCS, I never was a registered voter in Nebraska, but I actually volunteered for tons of campaigns, got involved in some advocacy work at the state level. I was even the campaign manager for someone running for office. And I was knocking doors, talking to voters. So the point is, you can still totally get involved locally if that's something that you find rewarding, it's something you want to try on, even if you're not a locally registered voter. So make sure not to opt yourself out unnecessarily. But in terms of additional resources for just general voting, civic engagement, I really want to plug all of the offerings that we have at the Secure Families Initiative. So first of all, at a very basic level, we coach you through the voter registration process. So when I was talking about those different residencies and those different forms, we make it very simple. It's all on our website. You can check it out there and you can register or update your registration directly there. This year, we're strongly encouraging our really well-connected military spouses to become voting ambassadors in their local communities. So we don't want just you to get registered and maybe like your friends to get registered, but other people at your base, in your neighborhood, take the next step. Try and make sure everyone knows about what the deadlines are and all that sort of thing. And we make it really simple by giving you all the support we need. So if you go on our website, you can find an SFI Voting Ambassador sign-up form where we encourage you to do one voter registration activity this summer and fall to help turn out even more voters from our community. We're also really focused this year on military teens. So you've got that kid who's moved around the world all the time following their service member parent. They're turning 18 for the first time this November, excited to vote. We want to make sure that they get plugged in right away, that they don't get frustrated by the voter registration process, especially when they've never had to think about residency before. And if they're going off to college, gosh, they've got even more mailing addresses to think about, right? We want to make it easy and accessible. And so we've partnered with another nonprofit in our space, the National Military Family Association. And together we made a website that is militaryteenvoter.org. So if there's a military teen in your life, please encourage them to check out that website, give us feedback if they have any, and register and get ready to vote. And finally, Megan, one more resource to plug this year. There's a new law in Texas that's going to make it a little bit trickier for absentee military voters voting back home in Texas. We want to make sure this doesn't trip up too many people in our community. So we've gone ahead and written an entire blog post that coaches you through how to prevent your absentee Texas ballot from getting rejected and how to fix it if it still happens. We just released that last night, so it's fresh off the presses. Again, go to our website. You can find that blog post, and please share widely. If you know someone who doesn't live in Texas but votes in Texas, this is the blog post for them.
Lots of great resources there. I've dropped some links into the comments for everybody, the website to Secure Families Initiative, the link for their info on voter registration, and also being a voter ambassador. So you can go there and find their information. And I just want to add on to what you said about getting involved, is that getting involved doesn't have to be a scary thing. You don't have to do the go big or go home type of thing. You don't have to be like, I want to get involved. I guess I'm running for the Senate now. It can be, as little as getting involved in the local school board and everything, and school district. If you've got kids there, if you're going to have kids attending school there, that you can get involved and start making a difference there in your own local city or even your own neighborhood, and getting involved and having that impact there. So it doesn't have to be the go big or go home. I know a lot of times when we say we need to make a difference, we need to get involved, and everyone's just like, well, how? I guess we're running for president next year or something, like, that's the only way, right? Like, there's so many other ways to get involved. So don't think, you have to do this big, huge thing. Like, starting small and working your way up is definitely a thing you can do, and definitely well worth it as well. So one of the questions I like to ask whenever I have military spouses on my show is if you have a favorite or least favorite duty station, and why it was your favorite or least favorite.
I'm going to be very diplomatic and answer instead the duty station that was the most pleasant surprise, and that was Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska. I remember when my spouse called me to say we got stationed there, I laughed out loud and said, haha, no, really, where are we getting stationed? Because I was living in Washington, D.C. I was working for the president at the time. I was so convinced that, like, surely we were going to get stationed in the D.C. area and I would get to continue my career as it was. And then we got sent to the middle of the country that felt as far away from central government as possible. But honestly, even after I got over the sobbing and the geobaching and eventually moved out to join my spouse in Nebraska, we had such a lovely experience there. We made awesome lifelong friends, and I learned a lot. Like I said, getting involved in state advocacy and state politics, that has really served me well ever since. So go Offutt Air Force Base, pleasant surprise.
Yeah, some of those, I don't know how to refer to them, kind of off the grid, middle of nowhere locations, remote-ish type of assignments can be, like you said, pleasantly surprising with how much we enjoy our time there, and what we find of that area that we enjoy. It's one of those things, like, you should never say never to not liking somewhere, because on the Army side, we hear a lot, like, no one wants to go to Fort Irwin, no one wants to go to Fort Bliss, no one wants to go to Fort Polk. Like those are the places like you will sob and cry if you come home with orders there. But I've known so many people that have been stationed there and they're just like, it was the best time ever. And so I think it's one of those things that we can't just write everything off. We have to experience to really know for sure. And then the last question that I'd like to ask, again, every spouse that I have on here, because I'm a firm believer that we all have something that we can learn from each other and that we can be able to share to help somebody else. So do you have a piece of advice that you would want to pass on to other spouses?
Don't sacrifice your voice for this military lifestyle. We give up enough as it is, and being civically engaged and opinionated, even political, does not have to be one of those things you give up. In fact, at least for me, and I know for many, many people I know, being involved in that way is an important part of our sense of self and our sense of purpose in this world. And if you think about it, that's just so fundamental and is not something that you have signed any dotted line saying you have to give up. In fact, you can also think of getting involved in issues you care about, whether that's in the form of getting out the vote or protesting or you name it. Like in my life, that's a form of self-care that's kind of non-negotiable. Those are things that I just got to do for me. And I think that's an important mindset to be given permission to have. So truly, if you're a military spouse and you feel like these things are off limits to you, I promise you that they're not. And I'm here to help prove to you that they're not. So that's another thing we do at SFI is we coach folks through the politics, do's and don'ts so that you can fully express yourself in the way that you feel necessary without giving that up for this life. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that is some definite good advice. I think it's something that we all kind of need a reminder for and need to hear as well. I think there is one point of time where it's one of those things like, you can't, as a spouse, you shouldn't do all of this stuff because your husband is, or your spouse or whoever is serving in the military and the conflict of interest. And you have to be like, walk the line and be this good person and not, raise a ruckus for anything. But I think, we've kind of moved into a part of society where, we can be able to be more comfortable with voicing our opinions and voicing the issues and pushing for the change that is needed. And some of our senior military leaders too, and their spouses that want to know the issues and reach out and want to talk to the spouses and encourage the spouses, to be able to say, hey, let's figure out how to make this, I want to talk to you about this issue, or let's bring this up to this person that might be able to help do something. And so I think, we've kind of swung gears a little bit to be able to have, the military leadership that supports us being able to raise our voice, have the opinion, and push for the change that is needed. So thank you for that reminder, Sarah, because I think that is something that sometimes in this community, in this lifestyle, we're just like, I can't do it. Like, I don't want to jeopardize their career. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that, and make a ruckus and ruin things. But it's a good reminder that we absolutely can create the ruckus and it's totally okay for that. So yeah, thank you for that. So that's all we've got today. Again, we've dropped lots of links for resources and things into the comments. So if you've got questions about anything, Sarah, you do have like a contact. Yes, there's a contact us button on their website. So if you've got more questions about either getting involved, being coached through some advocacy stuff on their politics do's and don'ts, questions about voting, registering, you can definitely click there and reach out to SFI and they can help guide you through what it is that you need to know. So thank you, Sarah, for taking time out of your day and joining us here.
Of course. Bye, everyone.
Yeah, and join us again next week, same time, same place. We're going to have some moving industry folks on. We're going to be talking about what's been going on this year, get a little update as to some of the issues that we're seeing, some of the delays that we're seeing, and talk about what they're seeing on their side and how we can help navigate through all of those. So join us then. Until then, have a great rest of your day, great rest of your week. And if you're PCSing, we hope it is smooth and painless and going absolutely great for you. If not, reach out. We'll help guide you through what you need to know. Have a great day, everybody.